All right, let's go over 2.3 factor form of a quadratic function. This is part 2. And the first essential question is, how do you use the solutions? Remember, solutions mean x-intercepts of a quadratic equation to solve a real world problem. So basically, we're going to apply what we just learned about the zeros of a quadratic equation. And remember, zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts, they all mean the same thing. All right, so we got this example which says Marco hits a golf ball into the air from the third level of a driving range that is 48 feet high. So we know that we are 48 feet high. The function h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 48. And it gives the height in h. So we know that h represents the height in feet of the golf ball, t seconds. So we know that t represents seconds after it hits into the air. The question is, when is the ball going to hit the ground? So we know that this function is representing the path of the ball. And we want to know when is that ball eventually going to hit the floor or going to hit the ground. So in terms of a function, what point is that? Well, in terms of a function, that would be the x-intercept. So we are actually looking for the x-intercept. All right, so now that we know what we're looking for, let's go ahead and solve it. So we're going to go ahead and take our equation and we're going to set that equal to 0. I notice that I'm putting the 0 on the other side. It really doesn't matter. All right, so when it comes to solving this equation, I am noticing two things. So the first one, there's a negative in front of my my first term, and I really prefer not to have that. I can also notice that 16, 32, and 48, those are multiples of 16, which means I can take a greatest common factor, which is going to make my equation a lot easier. So let's actually go ahead and do that. And I'm going to take the greatest common factor out. And I'm also going to divide it by a negative because I want to get rid of that negative in front. So once I take the greatest common factor out, remember that negative 16 is still there. So we're going to put it outside. All right. Well, if I divide everything by negative 16 divided by negative 16 equals 1. So that's going to be 1t squared. 32 divided by negative 16 equals to negative 2t. And 48 divided by negative 16 is equal to negative 3. All right. And that is still equal to 0. Now, because we do have an equation, we can actually get rid of that negative 16 by dividing it to the other side. And this is doable because we have an equation and we can keep it balanced. So that's gone. So I'm left with 1t squared minus 2t minus 3 equals to 0 divided by negative 16, which is just 0. So now my equation is much, much easier. I can go ahead and factor this out. So I'm going to do the emoji method. This is going to be a times your c, and this is going to be your b value. So 1 times negative 3 equals negative 3, and my b value is negative 2. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 3 and add up to negative 2, which is going to be negative 3 and 1. Negative 3 times 1 equals negative 3, and negative 3 plus 1 equals negative 2. I'm also going to divide by my a value, which in this case is just 1, so it's not going to make much of a difference. So my factors are going to be x minus 3, x plus 1 equals 0. Now that I have my factors, I can go ahead and solve for the zeros of this equation. So I'm going to set them individually equal to 0. And I'm just going to solve for x. So that's going to be plus 3, that's gone. So x equals 3, minus 1, that's gone. So x equals negative 1. So I got two solutions. Which one is the answer? Now, we're talking about time, right? We know that t is going to represent seconds. And all of a sudden, I changed it to x. I'm sorry. I'm just so used to x. I went from t to x, but it doesn't really matter. We're just looking for the variable. So since we're talking about time in seconds, we can't really use -1 because -1, we don't have -1 seconds. So we can't use that one, which means that this is my answer. So when it comes to word problems, you got to make sure that the answer actually matches the real world scenario and that it makes sense. All right, so go ahead and try the next problem, and then we can go ahead and check the answer.